Today we're going to finish the second half of the Telltale Heart literary analysis. Number 5. Find a piece of the author's text that shows an element of Gothic American literature and quote it using MLA citation format below. So to review, the elements of a Gothic tale include supernatural elements, remote gloomy settings, creation of suspense, horror, thrill, and deranged characters. So here I have an example. In the text, the author uses the element of American Gothic literature, remote and gloomy setting, when writing, comma, quotation mark, that's my lead-in. Now I have my author's words. His room was black as pitch with a thick darkness, for the shutters were closed, fastened, through fear of robbers. And so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door. At the very end, I have my citation of the author's last name and page number. If you need a refresher on MLA quotes, make sure you're using the resources I'm providing you. I have a video right here, I have a QR code right here that go through the different pieces of MLA quotations. Okay, so you can choose any of the elements of a Gothic tale to analyze or to pull out from the text. I think I'm going to do, for my example, deranged character. So we know that our character thinks that he has special abilities. He thinks that this disease that he admits that he has given him special hearing acute. He's able to hear things in the heavens and all things on earth. And because of this, he shows that he is not necessarily seeing and hearing things that are real. He is hallucinating. He is a deranged character. So again, we exported our text to iBooks. So you can go ahead and split screen and have the Telltale Heart open. I'm going to look for a quote that shows this deranged character. And there's a lot of descriptions in the beginning where he's admitting that he has this disease and that it has given him, in his mind, special powers. So I'm starting with my lead-in. Here we're going to have to move this up so we can see it while the keyboard's open. The American Gothic literature element of deranged character is present in the text with Poe's description of the narrator, comma, space, quotation mark. So now I'm going to drop in my author's words. So I have my text open and I'm going to copy a piece of text that shows this deranged character. Remember, you can use ellipses to take out pieces that you don't necessarily think are important. So here I'm going to put the disease has sharpened my senses. And then I'm going to put an ellipses and skip to something else that I want. I'm going to put, I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I'm going to end my quotation here. Parenthesis, author's last name, page number, and parenthesis, and period. Alright, so I'm going to toggle out of Google, or of iBooks, sorry, and I'm going to take a look at this quote. So, following that MLA citation format, and if you forget what that is, you can use the YouTube video that's linked there. We're starting with our lead-in, and a lead-in is our own words introducing the author's words, and the lead-in should have something to do with the actual prompt. So here, the prompt is asking me about the elements of Gothic literature, so I want to mention that within my lead-in. So I put the American Gothic literature element of deranged character is present in the text with post description of the narrator. Now I'm going into piece 2 of my MLA citation format, which is the author's words. The disease has sharpened my senses. I heard all things in heaven and in the earth. Notice I kicked out that punctuation at the end of the quote. That's not included. We actually put it at the end of the citation, which brings us to our last piece of MLA format. Our third piece is the actual citation. This is the author's last name and page number in parentheses. Okay, so once we have our quote in there, we're going to explain it. So explain how this particular example of an element of Gothic literature affects the overall mood of the story. So how does this element of deranged character affect the mood, affect the reader's feelings about the text? Description of a deranged character. You want to mention the element from the Gothic tale that you're using. Okay, so again, the second box, I'm using my own words to describe how that quote that I just pulled affects the mood. So remember, we want to make sure that we're looking at the prompt. How does it affect the mood? And we want to make sure that we're answering the question in our own words. All right. Next up, number 7, find a piece of the author's text that shows a sensory detail and quote it using MLA citation format below. So we know that sensory detail, sensory language, is how something looks, how it smells, how it tastes, how it feels, how it sounds, appeals to the 5 senses. So Poe definitely uses a lot of that within his writing. So I have an example right here. The example says, in the text, the author uses the sensory detail of sound when he wrote, "Now I say there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton." And then I have the citation at the end. So just like up here, where I have a link to a YouTube video that goes through the pieces of MLA format, same deal here. It's the same link to the same video. So if you need that, use that. So we're going to split screen, we're going to grab our iBooks, and now we're looking for a sensory detail, how something looks, how it smells, how it sounds, how it tastes, and we're going to quote it. Okay, so I found something I like. You look for something you like. We're starting with a lead-in. An example of after your lead-in, you have your quotation mark, and now we're dropping in the author's words. Remember, you can use an ellipses to take out pieces you don't necessarily need. All right. So here I have my quote. Let's take a look at the pieces. Make sure your quote that shows a sensory detail has these pieces. So the first thing is our lead-in. And our lead-in should be taking something from the prompt and restating it in our own words to introduce the author's words so that that's answering the question. So here I have an example of a sound description, sensory detail, and the text is, comma, quotation mark. So again, this is the lead-in, our own words introducing the author's words. Next up, we have the author's words. So here I used 2 ellipses because I jumped around in the text and took some pieces out I didn't necessarily want. So I put, and remember, we're doing a sound description, so we want something that goes along with that. I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. That is the author's words. Okay, at the very end, punctuation, kick it out, and we put it at the end of the citation. The citation is the author's last name and page number. We found that quote in parentheses. So it should look like this. So now I have my lead-in, I have my author's words, and I have my citation at the end. Yours should look something like this. Now we know we don't just drop a quote and walk away, so next up, explain how the quote you pulled that has sensory detail adds to the overall mood of the story. So remember, mood is how the reader feels. So here, having this description of the old man's groan, a groan of mortal terror from the bottom of the soul, what does that do for how I feel towards the events and the characters of the text? So, again, make sure that we're taking a look at these words that are used in the prompt and we are touching on them with our responses. So, this particular quote, okay, so I'm using my own words to describe why that quote affects my mood. So again, we see sensory detail and mood in the prompt, so you should have somewhere in there sensory detail and mood in your response to make sure that you are actually answering the question at hand. All right, now we're going to our very last piece. Number 9, find a piece of the author's text that shows that the story is told by an unreliable narrator. Quote it using MLA citation format below. So we're looking for something that proves that our narrator is not a reliable source, that we cannot trust what he is saying. So again, our quotes are in MLA format, so it's going to have 3 pieces, our lead-in, our author's words, and the citation at the end. So right here, right here we've got some things. We have an example. We also have a refresher video on MLA quotes, so use any of this if you need it. So let's go into the text. Again, we're split screening with iBooks, and we're looking for something that proves that this author, or that this narrator is unreliable. Starting with our lead-in, a quote from the text that shows the author's unreliability is, comma, space, quotation mark. After we have our lead-in, we're dropping in our author's words. We're quoting it exactly as it appears in the text. You can use ellipses to take out pieces that you don't necessarily need. When you get to the end of the author's words, you see punctuation, kick it out, quotation mark. We're adding our parenthesis, author's last name, page number, and parenthesis, and period. All right, I'm going to take my text away. I'm going to focus on my response here. So now I have my quote in MLA format. I should have 3 pieces. Once again, double check, make sure you have all 3 pieces. So the first piece is going to be our lead in. That's our own words introducing the author's words. Remember, your lead in should have something from the prompt in it so that we know that we're answering it. So I put a quote from the text that shows the author's unreliability is, comma, quotation mark. Next piece is our author's words. I admit the deed, tear up the planks, here, it is the beating of his hideous heart. Again, we get to the end, we see punctuation, kick it out. We're going to place that punctuation here at the end of the citation. And the last piece is our citation. It's going to be our author's last name and page number in parentheses. Page number we found that quote on. All right, so you have your final quote here for number 9. And again, we don't just leave that quote hanging, we need to explain it. So the last piece here, number 10, explain how the quote you pulled proves that this story is told by an unreliable narrator. So the quote that I choose here is at the very end of the story when the narrator believes that the old man's heart is still beating underneath the floorboards, and he takes it out, and in his mind it is still beating. Now we know from his earlier description that this old man is no longer alive, right? He chopped up his body into pieces. There is no possible way that this man's heart is beating. So the fact that he's perceiving that it is beating, and we know that that's not possible, is showing that he either is hallucinating or he's making up events in the story that he's telling us. So this obviously is proving he's unreliable. So I'm going to type something like that here in our last box. Again, make sure that you are using words from the prompt in your response so that we know that we're answering what the prompt is asking. All right, so here at the very end, I have my own words explaining the quote and answering the prompt. And I'm using words from the prompt in my response to make sure that I am indeed answering it. Okay, so that is our analysis of The Telltale Heart. Hopefully you did watch the entirety of video 1 and video 2. So at this point, you are going to turn this in for your grade. If you have any questions, feel free to rewind and rewatch sections of the video. And again, you do have links in here. The first link up here, this link here is to the actual guided reading. So if you did not finish reading The Telltale Heart, please use that link to watch the video and listen to the story and answer those embedded questions. And then you also have these links here that are going to take you to instructional videos on quoting format. So if you need to review just that, feel free to use those links as well.